Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me. I want to shout out to Doug for his persistence as my schedule continued to get sloppier and sloppier. And I also was in Portugal last week and wasn't sure if I was going to get here after 3 delays. So this was meant to be, and I'm glad to share this moment and be invited into your space. I will say that I was most excited when I came into the parking lot much earlier than I was expected to be here, and I saw all the decals on the cars, and I thought, okay, I think I'm in the right place now, because I can tell you that going into many faith spaces doesn't always feel quite as welcoming when it comes to social justice issues, how ironic that might be in my mind. So I'm here today to sort of talk about some work that I've been doing, and I hope that it aligns with some of the work that you're already doing. But I also want to talk about it in terms of challenges, particularly now in doing some of this work. I have never been printed on a program next to a word called sermon, because there are certain expectations that come with sermon, and I have to tell you that my dad was the preacher. I am a teacher, but the parallels are not lost on me. So I'll start with... He would always lay out his text. You know, there's a scripture and then there's a text. I don't have scripture, but I'm going to offer this as a title, a subtitle. Joy is the justice we give ourselves. In light of our country's current celebration of its 250th birthday, I am even more struck now by author Toni Morrison's 2011 commencement address to Rutgers University graduates. And in that address, this is part of what she says. I have often wished that Jefferson had not used the phrase, the pursuit of happiness, as the third right. Although I understand in the first draft, it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Of course, I would have been one of those properties one had the right to pursue. So I suppose happiness is an ethical improvement over a life devoted to the acquisition of land, the acquisition of resources, the acquisition of slaves. Still, she goes on, I would rather he had written life, liberty, and the pursuit of meaningfulness or integrity or truth. And here's where I want to sort of focus on a little bit in the commentary I have. She says, to the graduates, you know, who are very happy and they're celebrating and ready to toss tassels and all that, she says, I know happiness has been the real, if covert, goal of your labors here. I know that it informs your choice of companions, the profession you will enter, but I urge you, please don't settle for happiness. It is not good enough. Of course you deserve it, but if that is all you have in mind, happiness, I would suggest that your personal success is devoid of meaningfulness, free of steady commitment to social justice. That's more than a barren life. It's a trivial one. It's looking good instead of doing good. And that, for me, has just opened up all these possibilities of how to deal with all the nonsense and the chaos and the injustice and the corruption that many of us are paying attention to and potentially being overwhelmed by. So as many of you here already know, being of service to others is joyful, especially in pursuit of a more just society where justice for too many remains an unattainable ideal. And I love that I highlighted something that was said this morning about your mission being about love, inclusion, and justice. Some church spaces can do one, but they can't seem to pull all those together in a nice trilogy. Since working on and publishing my edited volume on global social justice, which was between 2017 and 2024, I now see this volume as a manifestation of something I have come to understand as joyful justice. It is for me this notion of joyful justice that allows me to move beyond the stuff that overwhelms. With so much division, inhumanity, corruption, and injustice in the world today, where is joy? Well, this is not the first time, and it won't be the last time, that this world and this country will be overwhelmed in crisis. Remember what author Mark Twain says about history? Does anybody remember? That's the teacherly part coming out in me. When I call, I want a response. Well, Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. It rhymes. In 2017, when I started this volume, it was right after Charlottesville. And some of you remember Charlottesville with khaki wearing pants and some folks walking across campus saying, Jews will not replace us. And I'm thinking, didn't that just happen like on July 4th in Washington, D.C., with some khaki-clad people walking across saying, we got to reclaim the country? There's the rhyming there, okay? Let's parse out this notion of joy a bit. Joy is the gift each of us gives ourselves when the world is too much with us. Joy is deeper than happiness. It is an inner source we each have that can be assessed when we need it. It is not predicated upon what others do or don't do, but rather on our individual and collective, sometimes, responses to what others do or don't do. Joy is about possibility and the future. It is about hopefulness in the face of despair. It is a weapon against dystopia and disillusion and disenfranchisement. But joy is not justice. Joy is a radical act of resistance. Joy is the splint as we work toward justice. Justice is the healing. Justice sustains the journey in this thing we call life. Now, what is justice? Now, I wrote a book that took 7 years, and I thought when I went into the book writing space that I would emerge with some magical definition of justice that everybody would accept. And I learned that there are about a dozen other books and people trying to define justice. So what I emerged with was an awareness that I don't have to define justice in order to do justice. What I did learn, however, here are the injustices. And if I'm not doing anything about it, then I'm being complicit. That was my takeaway from 7 years of doing this. So I didn't get that definition. But between that time, in fact, in the spring, I taught a course called Black Anger and Black Joy. And I teach classes mostly because I want to learn, because I don't like doing stuff if I don't feel like I can talk to somebody about it. And I know that may be its own thing for the psychologists and therapists in here. But it felt like if I wanted to read it, I also had to understand it. So I taught this class called Black Anger and Black Joy. And of course, the course was singled out because they wanted to make sure that it was not a radical course that was trying to get people to like overthrow things. I have never taught a course that taught people how to overthrow things, because I don't know how to overthrow things. What I do know how to do is to think about things, though, and to question them, and that in itself can be resistance. So I changed a few things and said, yes, we're going to be reading things and analyze them, and so the powers that be felt more comfortable with that. So I thought after 7 years of working on the volume, as I said, I would come back and sort of understand this, but in that course, what I understood is that joy is justice, in the sense of it's resisting. It's not the end, but it's the means to that end. Fighting for social justice can be joyful justice, individuals and communities coming together to fight for a cause bigger than ourselves. And Terry and Doug and Cynthia have witnessed our outreach to unhoused people. And while we are not celebrating the fact that there is an unhoused condition that so many people have fallen into and can't seem to get out, we have so much fun dancing and singing as we are being of service to others. People were doing boots on the ground. Some of our dancers, some of our clients come in and they are dancing. It is not stopping all the ugliness outside. What it's doing is capturing a moment of joy that we are deliberately creating. We hand out shoes, clothes, and toiletries, those things that many people take for granted. And the joy that some folks bring us by doing that is almost indescribable. So I challenge you to do something for other people that can sort of take us away from this dystopia that we potentially fall into if you pay attention to every single headline, every single news story, every single soundbite. That's what my edited volume is and proposes to do, to bring individuals and communities together to talk, listen, and connect on issues of diversity, and I'm so glad to hear that little lesson here. Diversity, equity, inclusion, humanity, and social justice. You know what's interesting about that lesson, though, is that I bet if you ask some of those people who are anti-DEI to define it, they can't define it either. But you don't have to define it in order to have an emotional response to it. Those same people cannot define critical race theory either, or wokeness. But it doesn't matter. As long as you have an emotional connection to it, then you can vote against it. But the resistance and the joy comes in finding other people who are saying, we are not being compliant. We will not go quiet into this good night. I am most excited that my volume offers a spectrum of perspectives. So while I did write this, there are 25 other people to whom I have passed the mic, because there is no way for me to try to provide a prescription to people doing social justice work, because each of us is in a slightly different corner of the world doing what we do in the space and with the talents that we have. So these people come together, they're different methodologies, they're different experiences, and it responds to this persistent request, mostly from white women. So let's just pause for a moment, because we're people who are willing to pull off Band-Aids and talk to each other. I have done so many of these addresses, and this will be an exception, I bet. I've given all my all, I've done everything, and then similar to the scene from Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, somebody will come up and say, there's so many causes of injustice to address, tell me what to do. And rather than offer a prescription that will surely not fix anything, I pass the mic to these others who join me in these efforts to say, well, here's what we are doing. Here's how we are thinking. Please join us. And by the way, share with us what you're already doing. And there's a pause there, because those who come up are often not doing anything. And that's the part where I have to take 3 breaths and meditate. And I have people in my family who will help me do that, so I'm on this journey as well. And recognize that I have to exercise patience. But I also recognize that I have to acknowledge what is for me self-care. I cannot be everybody's teachable moment, and I have now been in the profession long enough, and I'm old enough to recognize that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and sometimes when you want to be educated, I'll just ask you to go and do that education on your own. That has taken a while to get to, but it has allowed me to sort of see this volume and the responses that it's gotten from other people that has been overwhelmingly positive for me. This is my 9th book. It's the only book that non-scholars and non-teachers are reading. And I think part of that is the moment we're in now. When this was published at the end of November 2024, people were and are looking for community, they are looking for strategies, and they're looking for connection. And I think this is one place where one might find that. It is not about answers, it is about possibilities. So as a buffet of offerings, I want to sort of give you a sense of what the volume is actually. You'll notice that, and I hope people can see it, it was going to be on a slide, but you can see it here. It's called Social Justice in Action. And some of you may notice, if you've looked at book covers, that book covers tend to look the same. There's a way in which the title is always this way, and there's nothing you have to do except look at it. But no, we want the cover to be part of taking action. And so it really is about what can you do, not telling you what to do, but giving you a buffet of options to choose from, all right? So that's one way that we did it. But we also invited, so I didn't just pick my friends to do it because a lot of my friends are scholars. I wanted people who could talk to each other in everyday spaces. There are enough scholars talking to each other about things that don't really matter to the rest of the world. Issues of social justice should matter to everybody because it affects all of us. So I invited, let me just give you a list of those folks, not a list of the people, but the kinds of people who are in the volume. So 32 authored pieces, and it's not just essays, but it's interviews, it's drama, it's poetry, it's images, it's case studies. There are 45 contributors, and some of those are groups of folks. And there are 5 contributor teams, and among them, there's an HBCU president, there are 3 museum directors, 13 faculty members, but that's still less than half of the contributors, an architect who talks about buildings and social justice. I've never thought about that. And he talks specifically about the Indian boarding schools and Jim Crow segregation, and he even talks about the insurrection of the Capitol on January 6th. So that's how current people have talked about it, and through this lens of architecture. There are 3 poets, there's a dancer, there are librarians, a theater practitioners, there are 2 K through 12 educators, there's an evolutionary biologist, there's an actor that some of you may have seen on the screen, and on Broadway, he was in The Matrix. He talks specifically about what it's like to inhabit a character that may or may not agree with your own politics. And we've seen some actors who are politicians and activists, and the toll that can take on careers. And there's a graduate student group. And all of this, for me, becomes what I describe as a kind of buffet of offerings. The idea of this is it's not a novel. So you don't have to go from one page to the end. You can pick and choose. You know, on a buffet, you may decide that you want your dessert first. Well, in my world, you can have your dessert. You can have your cake and you can eat it too and then go back to meat if you're a carnivore, or sample the vegan and vegetarian stuff. In fact, there's a chapter in here on anti-speciesism, which I knew nothing about. And here I am going around doing these workshops on privilege and bias and not even thinking about the fact that we humans are also animals that did nothing to determine where we are on that social order. But yet there are animals that we have for pets who are like family members, and then there are animals that some of us eat. And so it comes from a slightly different space than PETA, but it really is about looking at all these systems that we somehow are complicit in perpetuating. I haven't stopped eating meat, but I've started to think more about the ways in which those who are part of that violence that does in fact engage when meat is being processed, and I'm not an expert on that, but what I do know is that that violence can transfer to humans. So a lot of the meat packing places are in neighborhoods where low-income folks can be somehow connected to that kind of production system, and behavior can be impacted by that. It's talked about in that essay. So here's the secret. I only chose essays that I wanted to learn about. Some of the more traditional ones, like how to interpret Shakespeare, I wasn't interested in that. I wasn't particularly interested in an essay on Jane Austen. What I was interested in, however, was how social justice is connected to science and biology. And we know about those studies, but how is it specifically connected to protest? So there's the buffet. Skip the salads, go for the fish and chips. Maybe you're a bread or a vegetarian or a vegan. There's something on this menu for you. Then decide what you will do after this meal. The joy is here. And I want to sort of end here, because I'm not keeping time, but are you? Okay, all right. I want to end here with a poem by Lucille Clifton, and here's the definition of joy that also helps. She writes, "Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, born non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up. Here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. In the words of Black gospel legend Pastor Shirley Caesar, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. This volume reminds me, and I am here to remind you, not to let anyone steal your joy. Not this administration, not your road rage incident, not the most racial profiling incident, not the myriad of other expenses or experiences that distract, limit, or seek to destroy us spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, financially, and otherwise. And please, please, please hear me when I say my comments here do not lean into toxic positivity. This is bigger than good vibes. I still know and see what's happening in the world and our country, even our own relationships and families, now and in the past, the good, the bad, and the unpretty. But as James Baldwin says, I am not a pessimist. I know that this society can do better and be better, and I am willing to call it out and in until it ends. This, for me, is joyful justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lester.